Dr. Kim Gin-ho rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. The cup had been sitting on his desk for hours, forgotten as he stared at the strange patterns flowing across his computer screen. Deep underground, in the Terran deep space, communications array, the air was always cold, and the lights always hummed softly. Most people found it depressing, but Jin-ho loved it here. This was where humanity listened to the stars. For 3 days now, he had been looking at the same piece of data. His supervisor had given him a box of old recordings from 50 years ago, back when Earth had sent its first probe beyond the solar system. The probe carried a message called the Beacon of Hope, a collection of human music, art, science, and greetings in dozens of languages. It was meant to show any alien life forms that humans were peaceful and intelligent. The probe had gone silent decades ago, which was normal. Space was huge and empty, and eventually all machines broke down or got too far away to communicate. But buried in the old data, Jin-ho had found something impossible. There was a signal, a very faint signal that had been recorded 3 months after the probe went silent. At first, it looked like random noise from space. Radio waves from distant stars, cosmic radiation, the usual background static that filled the universe. But Jin-ho was good at finding patterns, and after staring at it for days, he saw something that made his hands shake. The signal was not random. Hidden inside all that noise was a copy of humanity's own message, but it was different, stronger, changed, like someone had taken their peaceful greeting, studied it very carefully, and sent it back. Director Park Jin-ho called across the small office. His voice was excited but quiet. He did not want the other workers to hear him yet. Director Park Min-ho was a small man who spent most of his time filling out paperwork and attending boring meetings. He looked up from his computer with the tired expression of someone who dealt with too many false alarms. What is it now, Jin-ho? Another alien signal that turns out to be a microwave oven from the surface? Jin-ho shook his head quickly. No, sir, this is different. The signal I found, it is not random interference. It is our own transmission. Someone intercepted the beacon of hope and sent it back to us. Park barely looked at the screen Jin-ho was pointing to. Impossible. The probe has been silent for decades. You are seeing patterns that are not really there. It happens when you stare at data too long. Take a break. But Jin-ho knew he was right. He had checked the signal dozens of times, run it through different analysis programs, even compared it by hand to the original message. The mathematical sequences matched perfectly, but they had been arranged differently. The musical compositions were there, but played backwards. The artistic images were reconstructed, but with subtle changes that suggested whoever received them understood their meaning in ways humans had never intended. This was not just a reflection or echo bouncing back from some asteroid. This was evidence that something intelligent had found humanity's message, studied it completely, and decided to respond. But why send it back in such a hidden way? Why bury it in cosmic noise where only someone like Jin-ho would find it? The answer made him feel cold. Whoever sent this back did not want to be discovered yet. They were being careful, secretive. That suggested they were not friendly. Over the next 2 weeks, Jin-ho prepared a detailed report, gathered all his evidence, created visual displays showing the hidden patterns, and wrote a clear explanation of what he had discovered. He requested time to present his findings to the full scientific council, the group of senior researchers who made important decisions about space communication. The day of his presentation, Jin-ho wore his best shirt and practiced his speech one final time. The council chamber was a big room with a long table, where 12 of the most respected scientists on Earth sat and listened to reports. Dr. Lee So-man, the head of xenolinguistics, sat at the center with her arms crossed. Jin-ho presented his evidence carefully, showed them the original Beacon of Hope message, then revealed the hidden signal he had found. He explained the mathematical impossibility of such patterns occurring naturally and demonstrated how the message had been deliberately altered and retransmitted. When he finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then Dr. Lee spoke. Kim, your enthusiasm is admirable, but this is clearly the result of pattern-seeking behavior in random data. The human brain is designed to find meaning even where none exists. You've spent too much time alone in the archives, creating connections that simply are not there. Other council members nodded in agreement. Someone mentioned how radio signals could bounce off cosmic dust clouds, creating false echoes. Another suggested that old equipment might have created digital artifacts that only appeared meaningful. "Recommend archival duties for Mr. Kim," Dr. Lee announced with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Perhaps cataloging old transmissions will help cure him of these fantasies and teach him the difference between real science and wishful thinking." As the council members filed out, ignoring his protests, Ginho felt his career crumbling around him. He was reassigned to the basement levels, sorting through decades of old recordings and filing them in digital storage systems. It was lonely, mindless work, meant to keep him busy and quiet, but Jinho did not know that light years away, massive ships were already moving through the darkness toward a small yellow star. Ships that carried weapons designed to eliminate any species that showed signs of dangerous intelligence. Ships whose commanders had spent 50 years studying humanity's innocent message and learning everything they needed to know about their next target. The hegemony was coming, and Earth was completely unprepared. Warren Ellis Thokmar sat in his dark chamber aboard the hegemony command ship, staring at the alien transmission for what felt like the 1,000th time. His three eyes, arranged in a triangle on his gray face, blinked slowly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The message had arrived 50 years ago from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. At first, it seemed like every other primitive signal the hegemony intercepted from young species across the galaxy. New civilizations always sent the same types of messages when they first reached into space. Usually they were desperate pleas for help, offering their planet's resources in exchange for protection. Sometimes they were crude attempts to surrender before any war had even begun. The smart ones sent maps to their homeworld along with lists of their most valuable materials, hoping to become useful slaves instead of extinct species. But this message was different. Very different. The creatures called themselves humans, and their transmission was nothing like what Thakmar expected. Instead of begging or offering tribute, they had sent something that made his blood run cold. The message contained complete mathematical proofs that had taken the hegemony's greatest scientists centuries to develop. There were artistic works that showed a deep understanding of psychology and warfare. Most disturbing of all, there were theoretical weapon designs that made the hegemony's own advanced arsenal look like primitive tools. "This cannot be correct," hissed Ziekdal, Thakmar said. The younger analyst's scales were pale with fear. These humans barely achieved basic spaceflight when they sent this message. How could they know such advanced concepts? Thakmar did not answer immediately. He was looking at a section of the transmission that had taken him weeks to decode. Hidden within what appeared to be simple music and poetry were complex mathematical equations. These equations described faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and defensive systems that the hegemony had spent thousands of years developing. The humans had figured it out in just a few hundred years of technological development. Even more frightening were the artistic portions of the message. The humans had included paintings, sculptures, and stories that revealed how they thought about war and conflict. Their art showed a species that did not just fight to survive, they fought to win completely. Their stories were full of characters who turned desperate situations into victories through cleverness and determination. Their music contained rhythms that could be used to coordinate military movements and mathematical patterns that optimized battle formations. But the worst discovery was still to come. As Thakmar dug deeper into the transmission, he found something that made his three hearts beat faster with terror, embedded in the deepest layers of the message. It's hidden so well that only the most advanced analysis could find it, or detailed strategic assessments of the hegemony itself. The humans had never met the hegemony. They had never seen a hegemony ship or spoken to a hegemony citizen. Yet somehow, using only cosmic background radiation and gravitational wave patterns, they had figured out everything. They knew how many ships were in the hegemony fleet. They knew the standard attack formations. They had identified weaknesses in hegemony ship designs that even hegemony engineers had not noticed. "Look at this section," Thakmar said, pointing to his screen with a shaking finger. They have analyzed our typical invasion patterns and identified 17 different ways to counter each one. They know we prefer to attack from the north pole of a star system. They know we use fear tactics before military strikes, even. Know about our supply chain limitations? Ziegdahl stared at the data in disbelief. How is this possible? We've never encountered this species before. We've never even been to their region of space. Thekmer's voice was barely a whisper. They did not need to meet us. They studied the universe itself and learned everything they needed to know. Look at this analysis of hyperspace disturbance patterns. They have mapped our entire fleet's movements for the past century. Just by watching how space-time bends when our ships pass through it. Time. This was not a greeting from a primitive species hoping to make friends with advanced aliens. This was a psychological evaluation. The humans had detected the hegemony's presence decades ago and had sent this message as a test. They wanted to see how the hegemony would react to a seemingly helpless species that was actually incredibly dangerous. And the hegemony had failed. The test completely, Sir Ziegdahl said nervously. What should we do? Should we recommend canceling the invasion? Stekmar looked at the tactical display showing the massive hegemony. Fleet already traveling toward the human homeworld at faster than light speed. Thousands of ships carrying millions of soldiers were racing through space, confident they were about to conquer another weak species. The fleet commanders had no idea what they were really flying toward. With trembling fingers, Thokmer composed an urgent message to High Command. Priority 1 alert. Species designation human requires immediate threat reassessment. Previous analysis completely incorrect. We have not discovered prey. We have awakened a sleeping apex predator. Recommend immediate fleet recall. He sent the message through the fastest communication channels available, but he already knew it. It was too late. The invasion fleet was too close to the human system to turn back now. Even if High Command believed his warning in order to retreat, the ships would reach their target before the message could catch up to them. Thekmer closed his 3 eyes and tried not to think about what was going to happen when the hegemonies. Finest warriors encountered a species that had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this moment. Kim Jin-ho had been working alone in the basement archives for 3 months now. The punishment assignment had actually made him better at his job. Without other people bothering him or meetings to attend, he could focus completely on analyzing data. His desk was covered with coffee cups and food containers. It's evidence of many sleepless nights spent staring at computer screens. On this particular morning, something made him look up from the old transmissions he was supposed to be cataloging. The gravitational wave detector in the corner of his office was beeping softly. Ginho frowned and walked over to check the readings. What he saw made his blood freeze. Massive gravitational disturbances were appearing at the edge of the solar system. The readings showed objects so large they were bending space-time around them. These were not asteroids or comets. These were artificial structures, and they were enormous. Jinho's hand shook as he grabbed his communicator and called upstairs to the main control room. "Director Park," shouted, his voice echoing in the empty basement. "Emergency. Massive. Objects appearing at the system's edge. They're decloaking right now." The response from Director Park was exactly what Jinho expected. "Not now, Kim. I told you to stop seeing patterns in random data. Get back to your filing, sir, please. The gravitational readings are off the charts. Something huge is materializing near Neptune's orbit." But Director Park had already cut the connection. Ginho stared at his dead communicator in frustration, then looked back at his screens. The objects were getting clearer as more sensors detected them. They were ships, alien ships. Hundreds of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Then every alarm in the facility started screaming at once. Throughout the solar system, observation posts and satellites suddenly detected the massive alien fleet. The ships had been invisible until this moment, hidden by some kind of advanced cloaking technology. Now they hung in space like dark mountains, their surfaces reflecting no light. The lead ship, it's a massive vessel that looked like a metallic spider, with too many legs, began transmitting on all frequencies. The message came through in perfect Korean, then English, then Mandarin Chinese. "People of Earth," the alien voice said, cold and emotionless. 50 years ago, you sent a message into space. We received it. We studied it. We learned from it. Now we return it to you as our declaration of your extinction. What followed was humanity's own beacon of hope message, but changed into something horrible. The peaceful music had been turned into funeral dirges. The mathematical proofs had been rewritten as countdown timers. The artistic images had been corrupted to show scenes of destruction and death, but high above the planet. In a secure military command center that few people knew existed, Admiral Han Jinwoo was not surprised at all. The gray-haired officer stood calmly before a wall of tactical displays, watching the alien fleet with grim satisfaction. Sir, reported his aide, Major Yuhana. All enemy vessels have decloaked. Count is confirmed at 417. Ships. They're broadcasting the corrupted message on all channels. Admiral Han nodded slowly. How long have we been preparing for this day, Major? 47 years, sir. Ever since Dr. Chen's team first detected the probe's interception. Han smiled coldly. The public had never been told the full truth about the Beacon of Hope mission. Yes, they had sent a peaceful message to potential alien civilizations. But the smartest scientists and military planners had always known that not all aliens would be friendly. Hidden within that innocent message had been a trap, a test to see how any species that found it would respond. The aliens had failed that test by choosing invasion over peaceful contact. Activate the Prometheus grid, Admiral Han ordered calmly. Throughout the solar system, thousands of objects that had been floating in space for decades suddenly powered up. What had appeared to be asteroids, space debris, and broken satellites revealed their true nature. They were weapon platforms, disguised and hidden, waiting for exactly this moment, the same theoretical physics that had been included in humanity's original message, the mathematical proofs that had impressed and terrified. The aliens had been turned into devastating weapons. Exotic matter accelerators, gravity well generators, quantum disruptor arrays, and other devices that existed only in the deepest levels of theoretical science. The first alien dreadnought died in a flash of light so bright it could be seen from Earth. Exotic matter collided with normal matter, and both simply ceased to exist, taking a chunk of the alien ship with them. The second ship tried to dodge, but gravity well generators grabbed it and crushed it like an invisible fist. The third ship fired its own weapons, but they passed harmlessly through quantum disruption fields that made the human platforms temporarily exist in a different dimension. In his basement monitoring station, Ginho watched the destruction with growing amazement and horror. The alien fleet that had seemed so overwhelming was being torn apart by weapons they could not even see properly. Ships that had traveled across the galaxy to destroy humanity were dying in ways that defied every law of physics Jinho thought he knew. Then the terrible truth hit him. Humanity's message had not been intercepted by accident. It had been designed to be found, studied, and responded to. The peaceful greeting had been bait in the largest trap ever conceived. For 50 years, humanity's greatest minds had been preparing for this exact scenario, building weapons and defenses while pretending to be a harmless young civilization. The aliens had thought they were hunting sheep and had instead awakened a sleeping dragon. Captain Chiminsu gripped the controls of his small fighter ship as he flew through what used to be 3 massive alien cruisers. And now, they were just floating chunks of metal and glowing debris. His interceptor was tiny compared to the hegemony. Ships, no bigger than a bus, while their cruisers had been the size of skyscrapers. But size did not matter when you knew how to fight smart. Ghost Squadron, this is Ghost Leader, Minsu said into his radio. Execute Fibonacci Pattern 7. Remember, let them shoot first. Behind him, 11 other human pilots began flying in a strange spiral pattern. To anyone watching, it looked like suicide. The human ships were flying directly toward a group of alien destroyers, getting closer and closer to their massive guns. The alien ships opened fire with everything they had, filling space with deadly energy beams and explosive missiles. But the human pilots had calculated everything perfectly. Their spiral flight pattern was based on the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found in nature. Each pilot knew exactly where to be and when to be there. As the alien weapons fired, the human ships moved in ways that caused the enemy shots to miss them and hit. Other alien ships instead, Minsu watched with satisfaction as two alien destroyers accidentally destroyed each other, their own weapons, turned against them by human mathematics and timing. It was a perfect example of what military experts were calling the human doctrine, using the enemy's strength against them instead of trying to match their firepower high above the battle. Admiral Zektos, of the Hegemony, stared at his tactical displays in growing horror. His fleet had numbered over 400 ships when they arrived at the system. Now barely half remained, and more were dying every minute. This was supposed to be an easy conquest of a primitive species, but it had turned into a nightmare. "Are they doing this?" Ziktos demanded of his aide. "Our ships are bigger, our weapons are more powerful, our numbers were superior, yet they are destroying us." His aide, a young officer named Krelwyn, studied the battle reports with confusion. "Sir, they are not fighting the way we expected. They do not try to match our firepower. Instead, they use our own attacks against us. Look at this report. They somehow turned the gravity field of a gas giant into a weapon that crushed 6 of our heavy cruisers." Ziktos looked at the data and felt his blood grow cold. The humans had positioned some of their ships near a large planet, then used gravitational calculations to predict exactly where the alien fleet would move. When the hegemony ships tried to attack, they found themselves caught in a carefully planned gravity trap that pulled them down onto the planet's surface. But the space battle was not the only disaster. Reports were coming in from the surface of the human homeworld, where hegemony ground forces had attempted to land and establish control points. "Lieutenant?" Colonel Johanna stood in the command center beneath Sol, watching holographic displays. That showed alien dropships trying to land all over Earth. On paper, the invasion should have been easy. The hegemony had landed 50,000 elite soldiers equipped with the finest weapons their technology could produce. Earth's ground forces numbered only about 10,000 active defenders, but numbers meant nothing when the entire planet was a weapon. "Sector 7, activate mountain batteries," Hannah ordered calmly. What the aliens had thought was a simple mountain range suddenly came alive with hidden railgun installations. Electromagnetic accelerators built inside the mountains fired metal slugs at incredible speeds, turning alien dropships into clouds of scattered debris. The guns had been hidden for decades, disguised as natural rock formations and underground mining operations in the Pacific Ocean. Alien ships trying to establish a naval base found themselves under attack by weapons they could not even see. Submarines that had been pretending to be research vessels revealed themselves as mobile missile platforms. Underwater cities that looked like peaceful research stations opened up to reveal massive torpedo launchers. Even the cities themselves were traps. When alien soldiers landed in Tokyo, they found that the entire urban infrastructure had been designed as a defensive system. Buildings that looked normal were actually fortresses with hidden weapon ports. The subway tunnels were not just for transportation, they were a network of defensive positions that allowed human soldiers to appear anywhere in the city instantly. Sir Krelwyn reported to Admiral Ziktos, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Ground command reports total failure. They say the humans have not just built defenses, they have turned their entire planet into a single massive weapon system. Every natural feature, every building, every piece of technology has been designed to work together against invaders." Ziktos stared at the reports in disbelief. Somehow, this species had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this type of invasion. They had not just built weapons, they had rebuilt their entire civilization around the concept of defense. Their cities, their infrastructure, even their planet's natural features had all been modified to work as one giant defensive system. But the most terrifying realization was yet to come. As the battle continued and more hegemony ships were destroyed, Ziktos began to understand what was really happening. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were teaching a lesson. Every destroyed ship, every failed attack, every tactical defeat was carefully planned to show the hegemony exactly why their original message had terrified the Warren Alice back home. These humans did not just survive, They turned every challenge into an opportunity, every attack into a counterattack, every disadvantage into an advantage. "Send the retreat signal," Zekdos ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "All ships, withdraw immediately. We have learned enough." As the surviving hegemony vessels limped away from Earth, they carried with them the knowledge that they had encountered something far more dangerous than any species in galactic history. Kim Jin-ho sat in his new office, high above the city of Seoul, watching dozens of screens that showed communication signals from across the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the alien invasion, and everything had changed. The man who had once been dismissed as a fantasist in the basement archives was now Earth's chief xeno-diplomat, responsible for humanity's first contact with dozens of alien species. The screens in front of him showed a galaxy in chaos. The retreating hegemony fleet had done something unexpected as they fled from Earth. Instead of keeping quiet about their defeat, they had broadcast humanity's original beacon of hope message to every corner of their empire. But they were not sharing it as a threat. They were sending it as a warning to other species about what they had discovered. Director Ginho called technician Oh Hyun-woo from across the room. "We are getting more responses. The communication networks are completely overloaded." Ginho nodded and walked over to look at the incoming messages. What he saw amazed him. Species that had been enslaved by the hegemony for centuries were suddenly sending their own signals into space. They had received humanity's message and were responding to it in ways no one had expected. On the distant world of Kepler 4b, a reptilian species called the Sekai had been slaves to the hegemony for over 300 years. They had been told that resistance was impossible, that their masters were too powerful to fight. But when they heard humanity's philosophical writings about freedom and the right to determine one's own destiny, something changed in their minds. The Sekai began their first rebellion in 3 centuries. Their message to Earth was simple. "You have shown us that the impossible is only another word for something we have not tried yet." Near the star Proxima Centauri, an aquatic species called the Madani had been forced to work in underwater factories, building ships for the hegemony fleet. Their masters had told them that faster-than-light travel was impossible for their kind, that they were too primitive to understand advanced physics. But humanity's message contained complete mathematical proofs showing exactly how such travel worked. The Madani realized they had been lied to for generations. They built their own ships and escaped their ocean prison, sending a message to Earth. "Thank you for teaching us that knowledge cannot be caged forever." 17 species have declared independence so far, Hyun-woo reported, his voice filled with excitement. "They're all using the same phrase. They call it the human doctrine." Jinho smiled as he read through the messages pouring in from across the galaxy. Each species was different, but they all shared the same basic story. They had been told by their hegemony masters that certain things were impossible: freedom, advanced technology, successful resistance. But humanity's message proved that impossible was just another word for something that required creativity and determination. The message had spread like a virus through the hegemony's communication networks. Every species that received it began to question what they had been told. If humans could develop such advanced weapons and tactics in just 50 years, why had other species accepted slavery for centuries? If humans could turn their entire planet into a defensive weapon, why had other worlds surrendered without fighting? As Ginho studied the communication patterns more carefully, he began to understand something even more important. The original beacon of hope had never been just a simple greeting to potential alien friends. It had been designed as something much more clever, a philosophical virus that would spread human ideas about freedom, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat. The mathematical proofs in the message were not just showing off human intelligence. They were teaching other species that complex problems could be solved if you approached them from the right angle. The artistic works were not just cultural sharing. They were demonstrating that creativity could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The philosophical writings were not just peaceful thoughts. They were revolutionary ideas about the right of every intelligent being to control their own destiny. Director Hyun-woo called out suddenly, his voice tense with excitement. "We are getting a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. The signal is coming from the Kepler 438 system, and, "Sir, it is in perfect Korean." Jinho hurried over to the communication station and put on a headset. The voice that came through was human, speaking Korean, with a slight accent that suggested the speaker had been away from Earth for a very long time. Earth Command. This is the colony ship New Sol. We have been monitoring galactic communications from Kepler 438b for 47 years. We watched your battle with the Hegemony fleet, and we are very proud of what you accomplished. But we need to inform you that the real war is just beginning. Jinho's hands shook as he realized what this meant. New Sol, this is Earth Command. Please confirm you are saying there are human colonies already established in other star systems. Confirmed, Earth Command. Humanity did not just prepare our home world for invasion. We prepared the entire galaxy. There are 17 colony worlds, each one hidden and waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. The Hegemony invasion of Earth was not just their defeat, it was the signal we had been waiting for to begin the real revolution. As Ginho processed this incredible news, he understood the full scope of what had been planned 50 years ago. The beacon of hope had not been humanity's first contact with aliens. It had been the opening move in a game that spanned the entire galaxy. The universe had forgotten about humanity during their 50-year silence, dismissing them as just another young species that would either join the galactic community quietly or be conquered by the hegemony. But now they would never forget the species that had turned a simple greeting into the spark that ignited a galactic revolution.